we'll go through to our, where are we going? Our next panel? Our next panel, all right. Innovation and sustainability trends in the USMCA region. The moderator for this is, okay, good, is, he cut me off, so I don't have his name. Javier, what's your last name? López? I was on another page. Thank you. All right. Please join me in welcome Javier López and the panel for our next panel.
Thank you. Entonces, ¿en cuál me siento?
En la que sí, al lado de...
Allá. Hi. Paso. ¿Está acá? Acá.
Hello everyone, good afternoon. First, I would like to thank Mexico Now for inviting us to this event and to organizing this great expo and presentation. It's good to be seeing people face to face again after 2 years. And also thanks to Bruce. Bruce, thank you for your explanation and for being the master of ceremonies of this event. I have here with me Miguel Elizalde. Miguel is the Executive President of the Mexican Association of Heavy Vehicles Manufacturers, ANPACT. And we have in Zoom also Timothy Drake from ITS America, the Vice President, Public Policy and Regulatory Events. And we also have Jorge Vallejo from Mitsubishi Motors of Mexico, President and CEO. Well, thank you all for being here. While we're going to start our discussion on this panel, please feel free to interact with all the panelists, with each other. It's about the innovation on the auto industry sector. I would like to start asking Jorge, what kind of transformation are we to expect in the North American car markets and manufacturing sites in the coming years as a result of the innovation trends in vehicle capabilities?
La rifa del tigre, as we call it, no? Shuffle of the tiger, going first. First, thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you all for being here. It's a pleasure to meet all of you in this very exciting event. Almost 2 years or even more since the last time that I had the opportunity to chat with you and to meet face to face. Apologies for not being able to join you personally. I was a regular. Hopefully I keep being invited as a regular. The pandemic came up, so now I'm here. Thank you again. Appreciate the invitation of Mexico Now. Mr. Sergio Ornella, Senior, Junior, as well, very good friends of mine, and all of the colleagues that make this presentation possible. I respectfully salute Timothy, my very good friend Miguel Elizalde, and Javier López. Thank you for hosting or for leading us into this important forum. Now, when I was reviewing the questions, the transformation that we expect, the topics that were going to be discussed, this one came up, and to be honest, took some time for me to have a final topic here or a final conclusion to this one. It's tough, especially because transformation expected in the North American markets, well, manufacturing sites, even more complicated. So especially of where we are coming from, right? Pandemia, supply chain stopping, install capacity at some level, a lot of additional investments being postponed and delayed, and so many others. So especially if you would have asked me this question maybe 2 or 3 years ago, my response would be totally different. Now, I would like to split it in 2 or 3 different topics. The first one would be just normal transformation coming from pandemia into a speed up, recovery, trend up. which is just the way we just see business, right? Coming from 20% below on TIV, supply chain, stopping, capacity, install capacity, so just recovery. The second topic is the manufacturing conditions and transformations that we will start to see based on the reshaping of each one of the OEMs according to the new norms, new guidelines and regulations that are going to be implemented and set up and negotiated with the governments that change totally the transformation of the manufacturing and the distribution as the way we know it. The third one is, if you allow me, more simple vision, if you can call globalization, technology, and environmental concerns simple. The first one, everything is stopped in pandemic, I already said it, supply, manufacturing sites. So the normal sites, the normal conditions implies that a normal recovery would take place. Incremental sales, recovery of the manufacturing sites, just as we know, after sales, but adding a very specific improvements, the ones we discussed and disclosed during the pandemic, which is a lot of implementation of digitalization, digital sales, leads, financing schemes being automatized, which were not in the past, and so many others that were applied in the pandemic. So that is the normal one, and we will start to see the improvement of the sales channels and the benefits of the customer itself on the customer journey with additional improvements that we all know. The second one, for me, it's one of the more complicated one, and we'll start to see. In Mexico, we are starting to see today, and I'm sure you already spoke about this forum. It implies the same that I told you before, but adding a very specific game changer, which is how these new rulings, these new norms, these new standards will be shaping each one of the OEMs' infrastructure, and this one of shaping each one of those OEMs' status on how to manufacture vehicles and what to sell. It's totally different game for me. The simple one, as you know, is the globalization itself, new technology on environmental concerns, with entire support of governments to deploy those technologies, which I believe is not going to be so easy. Now, let me go deeper into this one, if you allow me. Different pieces needs to be added towards produce a finished vehicle. As you know, now we are seeing a total interest or renewed interest on the personal vehicle ownership, but also reveal the global fragility of the supply chains themselves. So the suppliers will start to review the best practices and develop more sustainable and robust supply chain relations towards accommodate the food and the industry. We will start to see, going deep into the question itself, a very accelerating electric vehicle market. I believe that we will be talking later into just the specific on electric vehicle side. But basically, we will be boosting on the demand for electric motors, motor controllers, batteries, complementing components such as thermal systems, battery pack, charging ports, again, new opportunities for the new businesses within the industry, some specific countries emerging as the leaders on the active EV markets, and some others not so strong on those. OEMs, I believe, needs to look beyond their typical offerings, retaining a strong brand image, new services to offer, as I already mentioned, creating seamless customer experiences. Automotive future, I believe, is still unpredictable. Things like autonomous cars and ride-sharing platforms will continue to have an impact. But again, I believe if we can add those three specific topics into the same formula, that's what I will be seeing. Still not so clear, but again, I can say that EV technology is going to be one of the main ones that will be leading the next transformation of the electric vehicle itself, as it already been doing since so many years, start with the pandemic. But again, electric vehicle conditions, I believe, is the one that is going to be prevail, as we are seeing in US, China, Europe, Japan, leaving aside the rest of the world, that I will be talking later about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jorge. Thank you. Great. And actually, what you mentioned about EVs is related pretty close to our next question. I would like to ask Tim if you can give us your insights of how fast will EV take over the marketplace in the 3 North American countries, and what role federal emissions and controls and infrastructures will have in this process.
Thank you for the question, and thank you for inviting me to join you today and participate on this panel. And I think some of what Jorge had to say is relevant here as well, in trying to determine how fast electric vehicles will take over the marketplace. I think this is a particularly relevant question for our organization right now with the recent increased focus on electric vehicles in the United States. President Biden recently set a goal that electric vehicles would make up 50% of all new vehicle sales by 2030. Additionally, there's been significant discussion in the recent infrastructure bill being debated in Congress on how best to leverage federal investment to achieve transportation sustainability and electrification goals. I think also this is obviously a topic of interest in Mexico and Canada as well. With the transition to electric vehicles being important for reaching climate goals, including emissions reductions. We've seen automakers recently announce investments particularly in Mexico, to manufacture EVs. And Canada recently announced plans to move to all electric, hybrid, and alternative fuel vehicles by 2035 as part of its net zero emissions goals. I think you also see automakers expressing strategies to shift to cease making internal combustion engine vehicles and moving towards electric, hybrid, plug-in hybrid, and hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. And GM has announced plans to stop manufacturing gas-driven vehicles by 2035. The next question becomes, I think, how we achieve these goals and advance this transition to an electric and hydrogen-fueled future. And there's a number of challenges ahead. I think one of them being expanding electric vehicle charging. I think that's a key component in this effort. Consumers consistently rank concerns about charging accessibility, what we call range anxiety, as a key barrier to purchasing an electric vehicle. Infrastructure legislation here in Washington, D.C. being debated would provide $7.5 billion of federal investment for EV charging infrastructure. That's important investment, but it still falls far short of what many analysts believe will be needed to support the administration's EV transition goals. We've also seen some investment in charging in Canada and Mexico as well. We believe that providing robust consumer financial incentives for the purchase of electric and hydrogen fuel cell vehicles is another key component in expanding adoption. Here in the U.S., I think that includes increasing our manufacturer cap, ensuring that at a minimum, the current incentive levels are maintained. And we've called for expansion, either by expanding the incentives themselves, making the tax credits refundable and transferable, and providing incentives for the installation of charging infrastructure. I think that brings down some of the barriers to entry for consumers when they're looking to enter into the EV vehicle market. But there's another significant challenge that isn't directly dependent on automakers, OEMs, and that is modernizing the electric grid and energy production facilities to provide the electricity that will be needed for EV charging and providing it where it needs to be. We have a significant investment need for grid infrastructure, and I think as we continue to seek to deploy EVs towards these goals, we need to be fully cognizant of the impact they will have on the supply chain, both below them, but also the consumer supply chain and the electricity that's going to be demanded. Additionally, as you mentioned in your question, emission standards do have a role in EV adoption. Studies have indicated that corporate average fuel economy standards across automakers' fleets can increase the adoption of EVs. I think that's one area in which the US, Canada, and Mexico can continue to collaborate to enhance EV adoption. But getting back to your initial question of how long it will take for EVs to take over the marketplace, I don't think we fully know yet. There are a variety of goals and investments and regulatory requirements and challenges that all affect that timeline. And at the end of the day, this is also dependent on consumer interest and adoption. I would note one fact here. In the US, in the second quarter of this year, there was a 33% increase in the purchase of zero-emission vehicles, including battery, plug-in hybrid, and fuel cell electric vehicles over the first quarter. And ZEVs accounted for 3.8% of the overall market during that quarter, at a time when the sales of internal combustion engine vehicles are decreasing. The question remains whether ZEV adoption will continue that acceleration, and whether other investments, whether from private organizations, from governments, and regulatory changes will be made to support that growth and continue the adoption. Certainly, I think there are some ambitious goals that have been laid out over the coming decade, over the coming next 15 years. And I think all of those things kind of need to line up together in order to achieve those goals.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Tim. Yeah, it looks like electric vehicles the market is growing, the market is hungry, so, and as you mentioned, I take this point that we still don't know, but it's coming. It looks like it's coming. My next question for Miguel. How is innovation, electric traction, autonomous driving, is affecting the heavy truck industry?
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you, Javier, for coordinating the panel, and it's nice to share this panel with Jorge and Tim, and thank you, Bruce, and Mexico Now for the invitation to here. Regarding the innovation, I heard a couple of weeks ago that somebody mentioned, well, the electric vehicles is something new. And I just wanted to mention that in heavy-duty vehicle industry, we have been seeing electric vehicles since the early 1900s. Because in Mexico City, we started to use the first electrical vehicle. It was used on railroad tracks, and it was connected to the electricity cable. And then around the 1950s, we started to see now without the railroad tracks, but now with the rubber tires. So it's not something that is an innovation, recent innovation. It has more than 100 years. But what has changed, or what happened that we didn't see these vehicles from 70 years ago until now? I will tell you that the main innovation will be the efficiency in the batteries. So now, and of course the importance that it is right now, the environmental regulations and the pollution of this, which is important right now to improve in the vehicles. So, and as it was 100 years ago important, the infrastructure to get connected to the cable for the electricity, today, as I think everybody has mentioned, is going to be the charging stations of these electric vehicles. So, how will this change the industry? Well, electric vehicles have less moving parts, which means less maintenance, which is one of the main challenges for any commercial vehicle. And one may say that it sounds easier to manufacture an electric vehicle, so this may bring some more competition from other non-automotive industry. For example, the largest assembly of commercial vehicles, electric vehicles in Mexico right now is a very famous bread company. So, but I think this will change very soon, since one of the most important things in commercial vehicles is the after-sales market. So, and that's where the traditional OEMs are experts, of course, and supported by all of the supply chain. And the electric technology will become dominant when? That's an important question. We right now are seeing it more on buses because governments give incentives, especially state governments, to these new technologies because of the benefits it has for everyone regarding the environment, road safety, and the impact on our society. In Mexico, 27% of the students and 41% of the workers go to their jobs in buses. And now in freight vehicles, we are right now exporting a few Class 6 electric trucks to California. So we will start to see the exports increase, and this will make a shift in the supply chain gradually towards the electric components. And other aspects to consider is that the government in Mexico, and what the government is going to do. Bruce mentioned it on the previous panel. For example, 1 year ago, the federal government in Mexico eliminated all tariffs that needed to be paid for importing any kind of electric vehicle. This sounds good for the environment, but also gives an advantage to all of the countries in which Mexico doesn't have a free trade agreement. So this may not be fair for the USMCA region, and we expect for future decisions like this to be commented first with the industry before they're taken. We are sure we can find a way to promote public policies that consider the environment, and also not to discourage the making of investments in the region which create more jobs in the industry. And regarding the autonomous driving, someone might say first start drawing the white and yellow lines on the highway in Mexico, but we need to start working on regulations and not use the highways as test tracks for these vehicles. But these vehicles do need to be diagnosed on natural operating conditions. So we need to start working with authorities on these regulations. Also, another challenge will be the internet, the 5G connectivity. And how will the autonomous driving innovate our industry? I think this might be an opportunity considering the lack of drivers that there's worldwide. So, for example, a truck driver here in the United States might earn between $50,000 up to $90,000 a year. Now, if you consider this the initial investment of the vehicle, and then you add what a normal vehicle versus an autonomous vehicle, considering the salaries of the drivers, then it sounds more interesting, this analysis on commercial vehicles than on a personal vehicle. So I think we will see a huge boom when the autonomous technology is more defined or more open to everybody. We will see a huge increase in this. And also, thinking ahead, it is important to see what will happen on cross-border autonomous vehicles. Between Mexico and the United States, there are 5 million crossings every year. Between Canada and the United States, I think there's 4 million crossings. And for example, Mexico proposed during the USMCA negotiation the creation of the Committee on Transportation Services. So let's take advantage of this group not only to fix the actual problems on the cross-border, but also to have a clear vision on how we will see the cross-border on the future. So USMCA, autonomous vehicles and drivers are very closely related. And just to finish, it's because maybe right now the lack of semiconductors or chips may be our first priority, but once it is resolved, the driver shortage, which is not right now the second worst restriction to promote the heavy-duty vehicles growth, so it's going to be important. And a good example is what's happening in the United Kingdom, where there's a lack of fuel due to the shortage of tank drivers. So the lack of drivers could impact as much as the lack of containers worldwide, which is another thing right now. So right now we need to increase the number of truck drivers as a regional solution until we could see the autonomous driving become more dominant.
Really, really interesting. Thank you, Miguel. And this brings up to our next discussion topic that we have been talking about. We are seeing in the industry a fusion between the tech companies and the auto sector. What's the benefit of the consumer? I don't know, Tim, if you want to start this discussion, this fusion between the tech companies and the auto sector.
Sure. I would say that the industry is definitely seeing more overlap between tech companies and the auto sector. You have technology companies branching out into transportation, mobility, as well as the automotive sector. And you have automakers, across the board leveraging technological innovations to set their vehicles apart from their competitors and to provide more benefits for consumers. I think the cars of today and tomorrow are getting smarter and more technologically advanced. Necessarily, I think we will continue to see more partnerships between automotive and tech. And I think you may see your typical automotive companies beginning to look a little bit more like tech companies. Many of you know about Google and Apple's recent initiatives in the automotive space. Waymo, which is formerly Google's self-driving car project, has built automated taxis to carry passengers for driverless ride-hailing service. Apple's efforts in this space have been ongoing since at least 2014, including numerous hires and acquisitions or discussions of partnerships with a number of startup automated and electric vehicle companies. And I think Google and Apple are obviously massive companies with the resources to invest in this space. And they are anticipating a significant market in automated and electric vehicles in the coming years. I'm certain that this investment is done in part due to the impact that they see technology having on transportation and the importance of that technology. Ford and Argo AI, who are both ITS America members, recently teamed up with Walmart to create an autonomous delivery service in Miami, Austin, and Washington, D.C. Argo's cloud-based system will integrate with Walmart's online ordering platform, route orders, schedule package deliveries, and Ford self-driving vehicles will work with Argo's self-driving system to deliver the orders to customers. This is an example of a partnership that I think that you will see between transportation automotive, as well as tech companies, and then your typical consumer retailers as well. Similarly, Ford has been partnering with technology company Qualcomm to deploy cellular V2X technology, V2X or vehicle to everything technology. And I think that there's a lot of that opportunity throughout the industry is for tech companies and automakers to continue to work together to really figure out the mobility solutions of the future based on technology. I think it's reasonable to expect that those partnerships will be expanded as we see more and more technology being incorporated into vehicles and the larger transportation system. I think both of those sectors each bring a unique strength to the table. They'll provide additional benefits to the consumer and ultimately will result in faster and more efficient travel, increased mobility for individuals with disabilities, increased safety on our roadways, reduced emissions, and a number of other benefits. And I think an important piece to this as well is looking at transportation more broadly, and this has been discussed a little bit here today, about not just looking at single occupant vehicles or vehicle ownership, but looking at fleet models and the possibilities for automated technology to be deployed in fleet models earlier, and some of the mobility benefits that could provide to consumers. I think all of these benefits are key to our vision at ITS America of advancing the development and deployment of transportation technology that makes our transportation system safer, greener, smarter, and more equitable. So to answer the question, there absolutely is a fusion. I see that continuing, but I think that certainly those two sectors bring their own strengths, and the product that comes out will be better when it's made together.
Thank you, Tim. Jorge, I think the audience will love to hear your thoughts as well about this fusion between technology and tech companies in the auto sector. How is this changing the industry?
Sure. First, I would like to tell Miguel, next time that somebody tells you that EV technology is new, you should respond to them that it's as new as you. It's as new as me, no? 40-something years, I don't want to say your entire age, but tell them it's as new as those ones. You correctly said that this has been over for almost 50, 60, 70 years, maybe more. the implementation timing or the adoption is the one that has changed the most. And if you would like to add that as well, that it's new, okay, maybe in Mexico you can tell that it's been over for more than 10 years. I was lucky enough to be part of the team that launched the first electric vehicle in Mexico, and in fact in Latin America, by selling the vehicle, in fact, to our government, Mexico City's government at that time, and this was more than 10 years. In fact, my daughter, my youngest one, was not born especially in the vehicle itself, but her first ride was in an electric vehicle. I don't want to say the name, to avoid any brand concerns, but again, so you should tell them it's as new as me and you and everyone. Going back into the question, the industry approaching a fusion, I think we are there. If you would like to see more collaboration or more scheme between tech companies in the auto sector, we've been there. Maybe we are not just seeing it. I think it took a very special relevance because of the semiconductors issue, plus all the supply chain concerns that we are now facing, and that I'm sure that it's been discussed in this forum enough, and I'm sure that this is going to be part of the discussions today and tomorrow, but this will not be regularized up until next year. So we are there, and I believe we will start to see a lot more involvement from the OEMs, the car manufacturers, into this specific sector, either through alliances, synergies, or even doing what the other companies did themselves. They started to do creating some mobile conditions, such as cellular phones, smart devices, and everything. And they just made the jump into the mobility as the one that we know it, no? From one point to the other, from A to B. So I believe the audience will have to either again create those kind of synergies, getting aligned, start working on, and this opens a very strong possibility for all the localization in the North American region. Something that I've been raising in these forums since many years ago is that in this case, North America needs to keep on working to identify the benefits on each one of them and start creating a very strong localization on many specific topics. Now, most of the features of the modern automobile, to be honest, I don't think those are recognized by the customer themselves, maybe other than the wheels, maybe the four wheels and the steering, and some specific SDAs, the cockpit that you have, maybe some specific devices or equipment, or the connectivity that is one of the main drivers. It's very curious, but it's one of the main drivers for the customer to buy a vehicle, the SDA and the connectivity. But this integration of the technological advances makes cars safer, user-friendly, and not only that, they have introduced several features that improve the value and usefulness of the automotive owners. Now these vehicles offer more, as I said, than one point to the other, but also, for example, 5-race technology that is changing into the auto industry, helping prevention of the accidents, self-driving systems, as we were discussing before, lowering emissions and pollution, predictive technology, highly personal driving experience. You can set up now the application preferences and the info system of the vehicle by using algorithms. Automobiles, of course, could becoming capable of understanding, well, that was since some years ago, but base commands, but now connecting those into smart devices and follow up each one of those commands to make, again, more simple the riding and, of course, more safe. Safety, in here, if you allow me go one step aside, I would say that one of the most toughest regulations that we'll be starting to see in the coming months, in the upcoming years from the governments are related to these technologies. We are now facing complicated issues on the Mexico side because there's new guidelines and rulings that needs to be implemented as obligations for each one of the OEMs, but those are entirely related to these points. CAFE situations, TPMS, which is a tire pressure monitor system, the ABS, plus many others that, again, it is not only for the safety of the journey of the ride, but also because of the conditions that are needed to make, to accomplish these guidelines and improvements. You saw the augmented reality dashboards. With the use of this reality, you can transform now your windshield screen of displaying information to the user, providing relevant information through the HUD, weather, speed, gas, mileage, everything that helps again the navigation more and more easy for the drivers without the need to take their eyes off the road. So again, I believe we are there. Next steps, definitely synergies, alliances, and we are in that need. I think these new tech companies will start to take and put special attention to the experience and heritage of OEMs that have built vehicles for over 100 years. Against Mitsubishi, 105 years, creating the EV technology, creating the plug-in hybrid technology. So that experience should be counting, and again, should be part of this discussion with the rest of the tech companies. And I'm sure that there are going to be some synergies all over the world. Good opportunity for Mexico, good opportunity for the North America region, especially considering the advances that the United States and Canada have as well. And Mexico, having all this huge manufacturing footprint deployed since many years ago.
Thank you, Jorge. And Miguel, how do you see these trends specifically for the heavy truck industry?
Yes. Well, I think right now we're seeing more the heavy-duty vehicles like computers on wheels. And first, like any other disruption, there is going to be winners and losers. And winners will probably transform into transportation service companies. It is a new business model in which the user or transport does not necessarily have to own the vehicle, as Tim mentioned before, and a model that may be more similar to subscribing to a service, and which also will not require the transport of operators on the future. So companies in the automotive sector will have strong pressure to become software developers and or providers of a mobility-related service. So you mentioned on the question the relationship between technology companies and I will say in my case, commercial vehicle manufacturers, and I will also add trucking companies, because now you will not see as the independent business units that you see right now, the technology, the vehicle, and the transport company. You only hire the service to move a package or a person, and that will be totally integrated as a service. Right now, in this moment, one of the benefits for the user with the technology and the vehicle manufacturers, for example, now in Mexico, there's new companies that charge you the maintenance of the vehicle by mile, which was not something possible because you didn't know the specific miles that were traveled in real time. So basically at the end, it will be a mobility service, either you move packages or persons.
Interesting. Interesting times we're living in. Absolutely, they're constantly changing. We have a lot of challenges in front, and a lot of new things coming up every moment here. Also, I would like to remind to all our audience, if you want to make any questions to our panelists, please do it through the QR code that is moving. It's moving around. We still have a couple of minutes that I would like to address to our panelists. We have talked about a little bit about regulation, but how do you see the integration of the regulation for the North American area, for the North American or the USMCA section? How the regulation is going to promote these new trends on innovation and sustainability?
Well, if you allow me, Javier, I think regulation will be very important part on this because, for example, the environmental regulations that make you have cleaner vehicles, the safety regulation that make you have the safest vehicles, will play a very important part in pushing the technology forward. But also what the government does. For example, in Mexico, one of the main projects of our president is the oil refinery. So many of the decisions taken in Mexico right now are to promote the growth of Pemex, the oil government company. So what the regulations are defined right now in Mexico are more orientated to support maybe some of the main projects of the president. So regulations may take a very, very important role. Also in the supply chain, they're being discussed right now, the carbon tax and other aspects that will need to promote, of course, the new environmental, to reduce the emissions. So the government regulations, and in the case in Mexico, it will be very, very definitive of how the approach to newer technologies, cleaner and safe technologies play a role. Right now in the Senate in Mexico, they're analyzing the mobility law and the road safety and mobility law, which would be very important in order to promote the road safety also in Mexico.
If you allow me to jump in, I think it's one of the main topics that will be deciding and placing the new way that the companies will be implementing these technologies. The reshaping, in fact, the reshaping of the OEM's strategy to commercialize vehicles depends on the regulations, the guidelines, the safety measurements that every government will be placing all over the world, different schemes. It's not going to be the same for the US, for Canada, for Mexico, than Europe, Japan, and the rest of the world, or Latin America. In fact, I recall one of I would say the biggest and most well-recognized CEOs that I had the opportunity to work with, which at some meeting with some government, to avoid mentioning names, he said, "We can do whatever you are asking us to do, but give us enough timing to do so." And here I raise my point in which most of the EMs are willing to follow exactly what the governments are seeking towards deploying and developing this technology. But we need enough time to do those kind of investments, those kinds of reshaping of the strategies. It's not easy. It's not easy task. It's not easy task to go from here up to 2030 to convert ICE technologies into the EV themselves for 50% of the lineup, half of the lineup that we commercialize. It's not easy task. A lot of investment, a lot of deployment, a lot of research, maybe some alliances, some synergies. So to be honest, I think it's key. It's one of the main issues, and hopefully I am wrong. Hopefully I'm wrong, but I believe that some OEMs will start to prioritize some markets that are currently deploying or helping implementing those new technologies versus other ones. You will see, I would say, US, Japan, I already said, Europe, in which they are already setting these guidelines, but again, supporting and going along, joining the right of the OEMs to make those transformations. Also, charging infrastructure is going to be key. It's needed. Mandatory. The pricing of the EVs will be depending whether it's still an affordable technology or not, depending on the kind of investments, incentives that is supported by those specific governments. Changing these cultural differences as well is going to be very, very complicated. So again, and you can see now the gap between. Hopefully, I'm not saying anything wrong here, but you can see the gap between the implementation of EV technology in US versus what we have in Mexico and Latin America. I said it before. 10 years ago, we were selling the first electric vehicle, and 10 years later, don't tell me that it already represents a huge percentage in the mix of the full vehicles that are sold. Charging infrastructure, other than some specific efforts provided by some OEMs that are deploying this technology very consistent, other than those efforts, you don't quite see it. A very deep technology already created for that. So again, everything goes related to this one, and again, it shapes our infrastructure, our strategy, not only for Mitsubishi, but it shapes the entire strategy for all the rest of the OEMs. Hopefully, those consultations that are on the review and the showing of the need to do a very smooth phasing will be supported and joined by the rest of the governments.
If I could just add that I agree with all of that, I would say, I think sustainability in transportation is inherently a global concern. Sustainability issues aren't confined to a single border, and I think that we all have a part to play, and certainly in North America, I think we are very much tied to each other in terms of long-term outcomes. I think it's important, as Jorge was saying, for governments to work with the private sector, work with OEMs to identify realistic goals when working through regulatory schemes. And then I think there's also an opportunity for government to lead the way when it comes to helping to answer those next level questions. So we've talked a lot about what we need to see for EV deployment to increase for EV adoption. But I think that there's a lot of second order questions that haven't been answered yet. And it comes to recycling of technology, of batteries, more sustainable manufacturing processes for the components of EVs. And I think that there's a lot of these questions that we need to work on now. Because as we continue to progress in adopting EVs, these will become more and more important.
Thank you, Timothy. We have questions, Bruce.
Yes, we do have some questions. Tim, what role is ITS America playing in EVs?
Sure. So we recently established a Sustainability and Resiliency Committee at ITS America, whose sole focus is on the sustainability and resiliency of the transportation system. Thus far, much of that effort has been geared towards establishing board-adopted policy at our organization related to sustainability. This included incentives for consumers, tax credits and the like. It includes calling for investment in charging infrastructure and grid modernization, as well as research into some of the items I just mentioned, battery technologies, advanced materials, recycling, those sorts of things. But also into workforce development. As has been mentioned, I think EV deployment does have an impact on our workforce, and it's incumbent upon us to make sure we're prepared for that. So that's one effort, and that was done in time to kind of have those policies out there as Congress was debating our most recent surface transportation reauthorization, which is included in the infrastructure bill currently before the House, and also in the reconciliation package, which may have some transportation-related provisions as well. And then also, currently we're undertaking an effort to evaluate a transition to, potential future transition to a road usage charge. And I think this is relevant both from the perspective of an increased adoption of EVs on our roadways, certainly impacts the way that we have historically funded transportation and infrastructure investment at the federal level and also at the state level in the United States. And just setting that system on a path, a sustainable path. It will involve figuring out a better way to fund those investments, moving beyond a gas tax, which just has returned more, reduced revenue each year to the Highway Trust Fund, and is running a deficit. So those are some of the primary ways we certainly advocate for other areas that impact sustainability as well. But those are, I guess, the most focused on electric vehicles.
Are you doing any work in heavy trucks?
So we certainly have a policy on, again, incentives for zero emission vehicles at the commercial trucking level. We've called for either rebates or tax credits and transferable and refundable tax credits. And also for charging infrastructure, with the understanding that charging needs for the commercial freight industry is different than for the personal passenger vehicle. So understanding those needs and addressing those, I think, is important. And then also in the heavy vehicle market for buses, transit buses, school buses, and the like.
Very good, thank you. Miguel, are you seeing any potential battery companies forming in Mexico?
Excuse me, potential what? Sorry.
Any potential battery companies forming in Mexico?
Well, right now we're not seeing any specific. I think Oscar Alvin from the INA might have more information on that because he's working on those issues as he's in charge of the supply chain of the heavy duty vehicles. But I'm originally from my home state, from Sonora, which is the area in which they found the huge lithium mines, and so there's a lot of expectation to take advantage of that. But now I don't know any company right now that is going to be able to do it soon. So I don't have the specific information who is trying to do batteries right now in Mexico.
Is the government supporting the Sonora efforts?
Well, I think it's supporting it too much. Because I think there's some it is being discussed right now, something that what will happen to the lithium and the regulations, if it's going to be allowed to be exploited, the lithium or not.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much support, if it's so much that it might be taking care of the lithium by himself.
You get another Pemex, right?
Well, it's been discussed.
Yeah,
What we really hope to do is that the government actually promotes to create more jobs in all of the industry, and to take advantage to work with the industry on seeing a vision to the future. That's why I mentioned the example that they removed the tariffs for all of the countries, even the ones that we don't have free trade agreements on electric vehicles.
Yeah.
And that, it sounds good, but it also affects the manufacturing of electric vehicles. Mexico is the first exporter of tractor trailers in the world, the fifth exporter of freight vehicles, the fifth manufacturer of trucks in the world, the 10th manufacturer of buses. So if you promote taking tariffs of the imports, well, let's do something also to promote the creation of jobs in the North American region.
Right, right. Very good, thank you. Jorge, you've been working in the automotive industry for a long time, and you've followed how things have developed, especially in the battery industry. And we just saw GM report that they were going to start doing R&D on their own battery cells. They're going to create their own battery cells. Do you see OEMs actually being able to take over that part of the value chain?
I think this new effort, I don't think it's new. I go back to the same question and the same comment that Miguel mentioned before, right? This is new. No, I don't think this is not new at all. There was
let's just go deeper into some information on in fact, the alliance that I represent, but that I have the pleasure for. There was some strong investments, I believe, in Europe, in Portugal, in some other countries towards really working on these battery schemes many years ago. This is nothing new. This is nothing that came up 1 or 2 years ago. I would say 6, 7 years ago. I don't recall the specific date, but there's a very strong incentives once that vehicle was launched, and of course towards keep on deploying the supply, and of course using all the localization and the regionalization that at that time Europe offered. Let's remember that Europe was one of the main continents that started to really deploy this technology. You should just take a deep dive into what Norway has done, Poland has done, which are the main leaders of the technology deployment, So I don't think again, this is new. I think the OEMs will start to make it get deeper and go back to my previous comments in which localization is a must for this specific region. You will start to see more and more, not only on the battery packs and the creation and deployment, also on the disposal of the battery packs, which is a totally different chapter and totally different part of the process at the end of the cycle of the vehicle. So that's a totally different issue. So there's a huge opportunity. Once this new technology opens up, deploys, and becomes more and more affordable for the customer itself, I think there's huge potential for each one of them.
I think it's still going to be a challenge for the manufacturers because they're not really chemical engineers. When you're talking about creating battery cells, you really have to be at the cell level and at the chemistry level. And I know that the manufacturers could actually hire those companies, but now there are a lot of battery companies that are so powerful in terms of their knowledge about the battery chemistry. How long would it take for the manufacturers actually to make that kind of transition?
That's for me as well?
Yeah, that's for you as well.
Okay, thank you. The tough one. I think you will be starting to see more and more synergies created and being deployed and being announced from up to 2030. Let's remember that most of the OEMs have some milestones to be accomplished starting 2021 that were announced. You just go see to the MTPs that most of the OEMs, international OEMs, have done. And you will start to see more and more since now up to 2030. Not only for the reduction of the emissions I mentioned in the presentation, you will see, at least from the company you represent, 50% of the lineup to become electric from up to 2030. So those synergies are needed either through personal deployment, which takes time, takes money, and takes a lot of engineers to keep working only in those specific products themselves for such a specific deployment. So those synergies will be start to see. I think we will be reviewing every once in a while new alliances all over the globe in which this technology is being deployed, not only on the research to find the minerals and the material to use those, as you saw, as Miguel already mentioned in the Sonora stage, you will start to see those and how to treat, how to cover, so it's possible, how to transform, how to use, you'll start to see too many. But again, alliances is nothing new in the industry. You just take a glance of what the industry represents, the manufacturing represents, the sales of vehicle represents, and you can see alliances all over. So
Sure.
Don't forget about alliance makes everyone stronger and faster to deploy some technologies and to implement into the platforms of the vehicles that are sold. So again, a reality that you will see more and more every day.
Very good, thank you. All right, that's all the questions we have. Let's give him a hand. Thank you, Javier.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you to Tim and also to Jorge and Miguel. Thank you very much.